Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the CSIA Fireside Chat. I'm Tommy Nelms. I'm the president of the CSIA, the Chimney Safety Institute of America. I hope 2023 is off to a good start. It has been cold here. I'm right outside of Nashville, and it has been icy and cold for us. Anyways, I would venture to say that some of our friends in New Hampshire and Minnesota would probably think this weather is warm. But so tonight we have a great guest. He is a friend of mine, Dennis Dobbs, Dennis has been a mentor to me and a friend. And we're going to be talking about gas logs tonight. And Dennis is an expert. And fun fact, so Dennis Dobbs and John Pilger actually kind of spearheaded and got started the CSIA Master Sweep program, which, I'm a CSIA Master Sweep. I'm proud to be one. But they got that whole program started. And so, Dennis, buddy, we are glad to have you here tonight. So introduce yourself to the folks. And before you get started, Dennis, let me say, ask questions, comment. We love to have interaction with the folks that are watching. So jump in if you have questions. Like and share this with everybody you know. But Dennis, tell us about yourself. Give us a little background, brother.
Well, I've been doing this for many years, right at 42 years. Started in 81 and as a part-time sweep, and fell in love with the industry. And over the course of just a few short years, I bought out two other businesses and then quit my job in 88 to do this full time, and 92 opened up a retail shop. And it was just at the right time where gas logs, the vent free as we know it today, actually came out. So I had to do a lot of quick learning, and for a learning curve there, vented logs were very popular. So as we progressed, we opened up a larger retail shop, and so my business was located in Northeast Alabama. We worked in Middle Tennessee, Northeast Alabama area, and also Northwest Georgia. And so, and over time, I got a job offer with Olympia. I took it. Then I became their technical advisor when it changed over to Copperfield. And then now I work for Ashbusters there in Nashville.
Yeah.
Get to see Tommy occasionally and a few other people coming through, but now I do training and quality control for them. And so I love challenges. I've also been heavily involved in the industry as an NCSG board for quite a few years. I was also the technical advisory council chairman there for a couple of years. And so I like to learn. I like to learn new things. And this industry is always putting together, more challenges. And so I've learned a lot about life, about people, about the industry and how everything works as far as the industry goes. And I still love it. And so still here.
We're glad you are, buddy. And now correct me if I'm wrong, Dennis. Now, did your daughter and son-in-law take over your old business?
My daughter and son-in-law, they bought me out, and I believe it was sold in 2017. I believe it was around March 15th. I believe it was March 1st that year.
That's awesome, man. So
they've done a great job, so I'm very proud of them.
And you raised up the next generation to kind of take it and run with it, man. That is so cool. But Dennis, as we were sitting around talking about show topics, one of the questions we get a lot about gas logs, right? They're very, very popular. And so, man, can you kind of give us a brief history of, man, gas logs? Tell us what you've seen from starting in 81 all the way to where we are now with all the technology and the improvements that we've had, coming from 81 to 2023, man. Tell us what you've seen.
A lot of changes. The years ago, I mean, there were, gas logs have been out for probably 100 years. It's into trying to make a realistic looking fire that mimics a wood fire. And some of that people want to get heat. So at some point, I don't know if it's in the 40s or when, but they came out with what's called a blue flame log, and it's a big cast iron burner. It's usually set in front of the log, and it had big ports. They were about a little bit where the gas comes out and ignites. Each port was probably uh, a little bit larger than 1/8 of an inch, 3/16 of an inch or so. And you had a big dial air mixer that you would turn back and forth. As long as you got the flames blue, you're hitting a home run. You're getting a good clean burn. So they weren't the most beautiful looking appliance. And as time went on, the vented logs started gaining popularity, and especially you have Peterson, other companies like Rasmussen, and some others. They actually really dialed in real well on the natural look.
Yeah.
And it's hard to tell them apart from a actual wood fire. Uh, their popularity increased, and so 92 was kind of 90 through 92 was kind of an interesting time because EPA got involved with the wood stove industry in around 90, 91, and it wound up creating some major challenges for wood stove manufacturers, and a lot of manufacturers failed to meet the standards the EPA put in place. So there was probably 240, 280 manufacturers of wood stoves in the country. So you saw all these weird makes and models. And by the time all the dust settled, there was probably around 40 manufacturers that survived. But right at that point is when this new generation of vent free came out. It was not the most beautiful log, ceramic fiber, which it would stink a lot until it finally cured out. But it actually, their burners were stainless and had laser cuts in them, so it was very delicate. But the manufacturers figured out how to make it look fairly natural.
Yeah.
And so the popularity has started growing excuse me, for a vent free for the heat. So they went from a 24-inch, an 18-inch, and then eventually grew to a 30-inch in the vent free. So that everyone loved that because they wanted the heat. It used less gas. So everything evolved, and then FMI, I believe, was the first company that came out with a universal vent-free box. It was big, bulky. The back of the box, it was rounded, so it was hard to move. And to my knowledge, from what I understood, we had the first vent-free box, universal box from in the state. And so we sold a lot of logs off that. And so putting the logs into people's homes, we wind up taking out a lot of vented logs, which are large, and we put these smaller vent frees in. So that set up a lot more of people complaining as far as like, well, they look lost. Can we do anything else? So finally, some of the manufacturers came out with 30-inch, and I believe one or two came out with a 36-inch at one point in time. So now it's just like the wood stove market. A lot of companies have, came and went. Technology's changed, and now the vent frees are very beautiful. They have a lot of personality. They look very realistic. So, they have the glowing embers, just like the vented logs. So it's a lot of new homes, especially like what I've went to there in Nashville working. There's a tremendous market for the vent free log market. So it's all changed and evolved. As far as the vented log market, it's still doing quite well, and there's a lot of people who just love that realistic wood burning look, to where you either flip a switch or hit a remote, and you have instant fire. And logs are, they got to be serviced, just like the wood burning fireplace that you got to if it's vented, you only run a camera. You clean the soot. You turn around and make sure everything's working properly. Make sure it's drafting properly with a carbon monoxide detector. Check for gas leaks, and just make sure that the homeowner's taken care of and their appliances are working quite well. The biggest issue with vented logs, which I've seen, some people, logs, we'll say logs in particular, vented and vent free. Over the years, I noticed that some people, we would go and we'd sweep the chimney, run a camera, we'd find damage, and he's give them an estimate for repair. And so some neighbor or someone said, well, why don't you, instead of spending all that, put vent free in it, close the damper. So a lot of people were trying to use logs as a form of repair. They just bypass all the damage. Mm-hmm. But now all that's kind of working itself out. I see less of that happening. More people are trying to fix their fireplaces as needed. But with vented logs, since they mimic a wood fire, if you have a wood burning fireplace, of course, if it's smoking back, you'll see the smoke or you'll see the stains on the front. And some people will turn around and put vented logs in there thinking that might work better. And, maybe, one out of 100 may work well, but usually if you have a drafting issue with wood, you're going to have a drafting issue with those gas logs, and it can lead to some major issues. So we always try to warn the homeowner about the indoor air, as far as the airflow through the home. Your central unit could be out of balance. You could have air pressure issues between the upstairs and the downstairs. It could be a cooking hood, or it could be working great this year, just like we're talking about wood in just a minute ago. It could be working great this last year, and you remodel the home. You could put new windows, or remodel and put open up the kitchen. You put a big draft hood. Now, while that's running, now all of a sudden, where did my gas logs they're setting up that room. So it's just something that's got to be monitored when you go back every year. It's like, did you make any changes? Have you had any problems? And it could be maybe changing out a central unit. It's a lot of different things, issues, just like we're burning wood and it's causing the fireplace to smoke back. It can have the same effect on vent-free logs.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, Dennis, let me ask you a question, because we get this a lot.
I said vented logs. Let me correct myself. I said vent-free, but it's vented logs.
Yeah. So let's talk about for the homeowner. They're looking at their fireplace and they're going, man, I know I've got gas logs, but I don't know if those are vented or vent-free gas logs. How would you tell them what's the difference? What are some things that a homeowner can look at and say, okay, well, I know kind of what system I have?
All right. Well, usually we'll say, if we look at it today, usually there is a manufacturer's tag that's with the logs. If it's vented logs, usually it's attached to the grate. If it's vent-free, usually it's attached to the main burner, but it's an identification tag. It tells the gas, it tells the model and the serial number. But it'll also give some indication that it's a vent-free or a vented. There's some things that people do get confused about. And so if we talk about a true vented log, usually the logs look very realistic. The most manufacturers have a pan burner. That pan burner, usually it sits on the floor of the firebox, completely flat with the floor. And you'll see sand or vermiculite, which is larger granules that go from a low point toward the front to a higher point as it goes back underneath the logs. And then you'll have glowing embers scattered about all over that, as well as both sides, to try to make it look more natural. Most manufacturers of vented logs, that's a similar kind of the top burner they will have. But the best thing is look for a tag. Usually it's behind the log, and it will identify what you have. Um, what you don't want to do is to assume, if you're a homeowner, that your vented logs are vent free, because your neighbor may have vent free, and say we get all sorts of heat out of our logs. All you got to do is close the damper on your fireplace, and all that heat will come inside. And I've had customers where that's the case, and you go there, and the whole, a lot of people have their living rooms dim, and they don't use much lighting at all at night. So sorry, and what will happen is there's a lot of soot that can come from that into the room. And I've been in homes to where you realize that the occupants have been breathing in carbon monoxide, thinking they're have vent-free logs.
That's right. And I tell you what, if you've watched this show before, you probably have an idea of what I'm going to say. But before you use, I don't care what type of fireplace you have, before you use that fireplace, get it inspected every single year. CSIA certified chimney sweep, have them come out. They will inspect it. If you don't know what it is, the chances are highly, highly likely that your CSI certified chimney sweep is going to be able to tell you what that is, right? Ideally, as a homeowner, I would tell you that, number one, know your system. And number two, make sure that you have the owner's manual, right? The beautiful thing is that nowadays almost everything's digital. So if you know the make and the model of your logs, you can go on the internet and you can find the manual. In that manual, it's going to tell you, have it inspected on an annual basis. And I cannot emphasize that strong enough, because just like what Dennis was talking about, it could be fine one year and not fine the next year. A lot can change in a year's time. And carbon monoxide is no joke. It's why anytime you have gas appliances in your home, in the fireplace, your log set, that is an appliance. You need to have carbon monoxide detectors in your house. It's so important. This isn't a carbon monoxide topic tonight, but Dennis hit on it. I think it's important for us to talk about, but it is, it's odorless. You're never going to know that it's there until it's too late. At the fire department, when we would have carbon monoxide exposure, the first line of treatment is fresh air. Because when you start having carbon monoxide exposure, you're going to get fatigue, you're going to get a headache. Well, when I get a headache, I want to go lay down. And so it's that important, in having that annual inspection every single year is going to help out a lot in prevention of those things. So, okay. So Dennis, let's talk about operation of those two fireplaces. Do they both typically operate the same? And what are the differences? We've kind of talked about, you explained the difference in identification, some ideas of how the homeowner could figure it out. Now let's talk about operating. We've had it inspected, right? We got the thumbs up. Now I want to start using that fireplace. What are some tips and some tricks that you tell folks? Hey, here's how you need to operate that gas log set. Let's talk about vented gas logs first. What would be your recommendations?
All right, vented logs. I always tell my customers the do's and the don'ts.
Yeah.
And I give the worst case scenario. I call it the holiday scenario. The wife's in the kitchen cooking. She's got the cooking hood on or turned on. And she has, the kids upstairs getting baths. They got the bathroom fans going. She's washing clothes and drying clothes. So the dryer's going. And of course, when the fireplace is going and heat's going up the chimney off the vented logs, the room's going to cool down a little bit. So now the furnace kicks on. So you have a lot of air movement in the home, but you also have, with the cooking hood along with the dryer running and the bathroom fans, now you're exhausting a lot of air, cubic feet of air out of the home. And it has to make that air up somewhere. And usually it comes to the path of least resistance is coming down the chimney. So as your flames, if you looked at your burning, if they're vented logs, usually that flame will be leaning back slightly or straight up, depending on how they're sitting in the firebox. And with this phenomenon, that flame will start pointing more toward the front of the opening. And because now all the air that makes up for what's leaving the home, those appliances, is now coming back down the chimney. It's pushing the flames forward, along with all the carbon monoxide, all the soot. And so, be wise about what you're doing. And if you're going to, use your logs, if you're going to run these appliances, it's always good to set the mood for the holidays, but keep in mind what's going on. Crack a window, let a little extra oxygen into the home or airflow into the home. And, it's better to be safe than sorry. And I would always tell my customers to put a carbon monoxide alarm in the room the appliance is in. So that way it'll let you know something, very quick. There's a myth about, and of course I'm sure you can chime in on this. A lot of people think that you got to put your carbon monoxide alarm up just on the ceiling, just like a fire alarm or smoke alarm. But carbon monoxide is the same weight and density as oxygen. So there's plug-in models that can go, lower down and more out of the way and out of sight. But vented logs, the other characteristic that what they have or don't have that vent free has is an oxygen depletion sensor. And there's really no safety device on a vented log other than that safety pilot. Right. So if it starts producing carbon monoxide back in the home, it won't shut off. And there have been some horror stories where people had them in a bedroom and then, got the door shut and, they don't shut off. They just keep producing carbon monoxide. There's not enough air that is leaving that room going up the chimney to carry the emissions out. So unfortunately, people, passed away because of this mistake.
That's right. Or like an older set of vented gas logs where they're match light, where there is no safety pilot, right? And that's why we always tell people never leave a fire unattended. Yep. You always want to be close, and you hit on it before, but I'm going to reiterate it. If you identify, I've got a vented gas log set. Every time before you light it, check to make sure the damper's open. You don't know if somebody else came back through and closed that damper and after you thought that you left it open, but just check it real quick. You talked about the importance of that earlier, but I always want to reiterate that because you know how it is, Dennis. A lot of times you'll go somewhere and be like, man, I've got this problem. And that could be one of the problems, right? That the damper's closed, and that's not good. Even if you have a safety clamp on that damper that prevents that damper from fully closing, that damper needs to be fully open when it's in operation.
And that safety clamp, over the years, I've watched the bolt of that on that safety clamp go from very, very short to very, very long.
Yeah.
And, but that's kind of a fail safe. That's kind of where if someone doesn't open the damper, it's already cracked open some, but it's not completely closed either. It's going to put, it's not going to vent properly, but at least, it lets some fresh air in or vent some of the emissions out. But go when you're servicing gas logs, identify the gas logs, go over with the homeowner about the gas logs, put it in writing about the gas logs, if you have to come up with a procedure of how to operate these logs. The manufacturers are always best, but some of the older logs, you can't find any information on them, especially vented logs. So go over with the homeowner the operation, just basic do's and don'ts. But, that can make their life a lot easier and a lot healthier.
That's exactly right. And when you're a homeowner and you have your CSIA certified sweep there, ask them questions. He or she is going to be more than happy to sit there with you and go over that stuff with you. It's very important. I just saw that Daniel Owens gave us a thumbs up. So Daniel, thanks for tuning in, buddy. Ask those questions. It's important. We want you to be educated. We educate ourselves for our knowledge, and so that we are better at our trade. but we want to pass that education on to you. So Dennis, let's move on to vent-free gas logs. Let's talk about those a little bit, man. What do's and don'ts do you have for the folks out there on vent-frees?
Well, first, I'll describe the difference between that and looking at those compared to a vented set. The vented set, we talked about the flames being in a pan and sets up down on the bottom of the firebox. A vent-free, usually the grate is more of a frame, and the burners are elevated up from the floor of the firebox. They're usually, if you look, they're visible. The burner is visible, and you'll usually see the pilot light fairly easily on some models, and the glowing embers, usually a small amount of glowing embers that goes across the front on models that have that. And there are some out there, not trying to confuse everybody, but there are some models or brands that the front is a little bit lower, but you have very small amount of embers that are strategically placed throughout. The other difference between vent-free and vented logs is the logs are precisely set. There'll be a pegs that hold the logs in place, or there'll be a notch in the logs, so the logs are precisely set. The logs cannot cross over the flame like a vented set would. They're strategically placed. So if you have a set of vent-free logs and you see soot on your log and they're vent-free, then you probably got an issue going on there. So I would not use them until they're cleaned and also inspected.
So Dennis, are you saying that if I don't like the way that the logs are laid out and I know I have a vent-free, I can't I can't move those logs around, correct?
You cannot move those logs around. And if let's say you do see soot on a log, you should get an owner's manual out, and those owner's manuals for vent frees will show the log placement exactly like it should be for that model. And it may be just maybe one of the kids knocked the log out of place, while they're playing around, but yet too, it's not everybody. The most dangerous thing is people not knowing what they have.
Right.
And so both have their goods and their bads by not knowing what you have. Vent free, it is for heat. The flames, usually you'll see a light blue flame there right off the top of the burner, and it'll go to a light yellow. If you see a tall flame that's more yellow, darker yellow at the bottom, and even a darker yellow as it goes up, and it looks more natural, like it is a wood fire, you've got a major issue. And I ran to a lot of customers who's had that situation. Vent free, they look fairly natural now, and it's easy to fool people. They have control systems. Some models have a remote control that can operate every function that you need for that log. You can light the pilot light. You can do everything with a remote control. And there's other models that are more basic that have a manual control, and you have to light those with a little push button igniter. You push the control in to the pilot, and then you turn the knob to the desired flame height. And so some people like the basic design, some people like the more advanced.
Yeah.
But the vent free, its number one enemy is household dust. It circulates its own air, especially if that damper is shut, or if you have a vent free firebox, and you will as the heat is produced in the firebox, cool air goes around the base of the logs. Around, and log vent free usually has gravel as the media that goes around the logs as well, but you'll see a lot of dust build up on the gravel and on some of the logs. But that dust also gets into the main burner and into the pilot light, and so a lot of vent free has an issue with the pilot light going out prematurely. And that's why dust builds up and the air and fuel is not mixing together like it should. So you have a flame that's not is at its optimum, and it should be seeing blue on your pilot light. It should look like a jet engine, and it shouldn't boat upward very much. There should not be any yellow in it, but once you see a yellow tip, and that yellow tip bows upward, a lot of times, it cannot heat up the thermocouple like it should, and it goes out. But the vent freeze also, people need to realize, since all that heat's coming in into the home for heat, to heat the home, usually when it comes out of the firebox, it'll go straight up right to the bottom of the mantle. Or if they have a television above, they'll go straight up to the television, and it goes right to the ceiling. So, keep in mind what's going on around that. I'm not a big advocate of hanging your Christmas stockings on the mantle for vent free.
Absolutely. We got a good question from Philip Perino. He says, what about moisture production with vent-free systems?
All right. Vent free, usually you will see more moisture build up with a propane set than you will a natural set. And vent free, there you have to look through history a little bit, but there's other vent free appliances out there, like the wall heaters. And I know Tommy's probably seen them. They're more popular in the South. Vent free is very popular in the Southeast, and more so than I'm sure anywhere else in the country. But keep in mind when vent free came out years ago too, the homes that were built back in the day, we'll say probably 30, 40 years ago, the homes were not built as tight as they were up north. They weren't insulated as well either. So there's air coming in, air going out, and so moisture was not that big of a deal, and carbon monoxide was not that big of a deal with a vent free. But if you take a home that's extremely tight, and we saw this evolution take place here. Of course, we did a lot of new construction with vent free and direct vent and wood burning, but we saw a lot of people who would use the foam insulation. They would have the better doors and windows, and have more of an energy package type of insulation on their home. So it's extremely tight. And moisture can become an issue, and usually it goes right to the cool surfaces. So you'll see the water beat up on, or moisture beat up on your windows, especially the lower windows. But so back in the day, with vent free, the directions in the manual would say you need to crack a window 1 square inch per 1,000 BTUs. I don't see that anymore. But at one point in time, the manuals were very plain language. They were very gray language to start with. Then for a short period of time, they were very plain language. It spelled everything out. Now you don't quite see that anymore. But cracking a window in the room the appliance is in, it'll make a lot of difference in relieving that moisture.
Good.
And keep in mind too that moisture doesn't leave, and you got other appliances that are kicking moisture.
Yes. And Dennis, you brought up a really good point too. So Philip, I hope that helps with that question. But to your point, Dennis, and for the homeowner, it's important to understand that what kind of gas that you have in your home. You're gonna, the most popular types, one of two, right? You're either gonna have natural gas or you're gonna have liquid propane. Okay, those systems, Dennis, are completely different. Right. So you need to know what gas it is that supplies your house, and you need to make sure that the appliance that you have is set up for that particular gas. That's very important. Correct?
That's correct. Vented logs can be converted over to another fuel. Vent free cannot be. So there's a big difference.
Yeah, and so it's important to know that. Educate yourself as a homeowner. Know what is supplying your home. know what the appliance is, and make sure. That's one of the things that we'll check, right, as a CSIA certified sweep. We're going to come out there. We're going to try to find the data plate. If the data plate's not there, we're going to keep digging and see if we can find some sort of information that's going to tell us what we need to know about that particular set. And then we're going to make sure, is it set up for the right gas, right? And we're going to be able to ascertain that, because you don't want a set that is set up to be used with natural gas to be using propane and vice versa.
That's correct.
It's going to create a myriad of problems. The problems, and none of those things are good. They're all bad things. So, Dennis, we're 35 minutes in. There's one more topic I wanted to hit on before we wrap it up. The new fancy thing, high efficiency gas fireplaces, right? And
Yep.
so a lot of people are calling those direct vents. Some of them are high efficiency. Let's talk about those. How do you know what that looks like? What are some key things, and what are some do's and don'ts with those?
Well, direct vents, they're we'll say there's two types. We'll just say, just to kind of keep it basic.
Sure.
They're like, if you want to went on vacation in the mountains, and you stay in a cabin or a cottage, a lot of times they have a direct vent fireplace that is a smaller or lower BTU. It'll be a smaller flame. You won't feel much heat from it. That's not a high efficiency, as we would say, gas fireplace. And usually those are very inexpensive compared to the direct vents that are heater rated, are considered to be high efficiency gas fireplaces. Their BTUs are much higher, anywhere from 40 to 60,000 BTUs. And there's a difference in cost. The cheaper version would have a tempered glass, and the more high efficiency unit, the one that produces more heat, would have a full ceramic glass that is much more expensive. It's more of an amber color. If you held it up and looked through the light through the glass, and it can take a tremendous amount of heat. I tell people that the glass in it is like Pyrex cookware, so made to take a tremendous amount of heat. So when you turn that high efficiency on, you'll feel a strong, very strong radiant heat that comes out of the glass. And it's so efficient as far as producing heat that some companies, you don't really have to use a blower. You don't have to install a blower on the unit if you don't want to. And a direct vent, you'll look outside, you'll see a horizontal cap that's on the side of the home. It can vent that way, or you'll see a little vent pipe that comes up out of the roof, and it'll be a pipe inside a pipe between the inner and outer. It sucks the oxygen in for the fire to take place, and up through the middle or the inner pipe, there goes the emissions. But that unit is completely sealed off from the interior of the home, and it's one of the safest fireplaces you can have, because whatever you do in the home, as long as it's not spraying, some flammable on the front of the unit, it's not going to affect the logs. Whatever goes on in the fireplace, if there's an issue with logs, maybe one of the logs fell across the burner, and it soots up the glass, or if there's a problem with the venting, it'll soot up the glass and it'll eventually shut off. And they have a lot of safety features built into these. They've come a long way. And I'm sure glad that they did, because we started selling direct vents in probably 93, 94, and it was hard to get people to bite on that concept. And before I sold the business, and even now, Ashbusters, we've been in a lot of direct vents. So direct vents are the place to be now. It's much safer. It's much better. You don't have to worry about opening a damper or all these carbon monoxide issues. So they're the safest you can find.
That's right. And just like everything else, it needs to be inspected annually.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Well, Dennis, man, that was some great information. If anybody has any questions, we'll stick around for a little bit. But man, that was some great information. Of course, for those that are watching, like CSIA's page, share this, please. We want to get this information in front of as many people as we possibly can. But also, as usual, I'll tell you, you can always go to the CSIA's website, csia.org, and you can find a lot of this information. If you can't find it there, pick up the phone, give us a call. We've got a staff there in our center, in our facility there in Indiana. They're more than happy to help you with any of these questions. But Dennis, I think that this was so good because as gas logs and as gas fireplaces start to become more and more popular, people need to know about this, and they need to educate themselves. Okay, so here's another question. Phil asked another question. This is good. What about all the cold air coming around the direct vent fireplace when it's not in use? What are your thoughts on that, Dennis? Okay,
if you have a vent-free fireplace, if there's a vent-free fireplace, we'll say, or a firebox with vent-free logs and a mason, and let's just say maybe he's talking about a vent-free firebox with vent-free logs. Sometimes the chase that's built on the exterior of the home, when they're building a new home, for some reason, a lot of builders, they don't insulate that chase very much, and it's not as airtight as it should be. So there's lots of channels through that vent-free firebox where air can be make its way through the unit and come back out into the room. And especially if that air is coming in down low, and the colder it gets, it'll pull that air through that firebox, or what appears to be around the firebox or through the firebox into the room, and you will feel that cold air. So the best way to stop that would, start it at the start of the construction, seal off the chase real well, insulate it, caulk it, just make it as tight as you can, and let that fireplace live in a good, warm, tight environment.
Yeah, and I think what he's talking about, Dennis, is on a direct vent where you have,
yes,
it's pulling in that outside air on a direct vent.
Okay.
What are your tips there, for keeping that? Is there any way to kind of slow that air down?
Well, usually we'll say the same scenario can happen around a direct vent fireplace, as I just described with that. Usually it's the chase to where that cold air is making its way through. And as far as the incoming air that's coming down for a direct vent, usually that goes straight into the firebox and back up through the actual exhaust vent. Okay. And usually that air will not infiltrate into the home. Now, there is a hybrid, we'll say, between vented logs and a direct vent, and sometimes people confuse those for direct vents, and it's called a B-vent fireplace. Yep. Usually it has an outside air hose that goes to the outside, and unfortunately that outside air hose will let a lot of outside air make its way in, and kind of feel cool.
That's right. And, really, you can't use, obviously, that fireplace. You can't be around it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But if you're in that room and you've already had the system inspected, and you're feeling that cold air, turn the system on, heat that box up and try to reverse that airflow, would be ideal if you can. If you have vented logs and you feel cold air, and we'll say, in this case, we'll say it's a masonry fireplace, you have air pressure issues in a home, and you may not notice them, like when you turn your vented logs on. We'll say it may smell just for a couple of seconds, and you won't smell it anymore because the flames kick on. The flames they build up real quick, and it's exhausting. So it's, everything's starting to push out the chimney. But also, when you turn the logs off and the chimney cools back down, you have a damper clamp that's on there. So the damper can't close all the way.
the colder it is outside, the more positive pressure you have up at the ceiling level, or 2 story, it's up at the second floor, and it can pull cool air in through your firebox, especially if it's in the basement or lower floor.
Okay, great. And Phil, if you have any follow-up questions to that, man, ask it, and we'll happily answer them. And so we got another question from Bill Wald, our executive director. He says, how far do you turn your key on when starting a natural gas fireplace? Quarter turn, half turn before turning it up? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, usually, now I don't know if his logs are the match lit type of log, or or they already have a control on the burner for the log. But usually, I would turn the key till it stops turning, but not we'll say not force it.
Right.
Because that way the seal is going to the maximum the other way, and it sometimes in between all the way on and all the way off, it'll leak.
Okay, yeah, good point. Yeah, and go ahead, Dennis.
No, I was going to say one thing that I noticed years ago, and I think it's something that building officials don't pay a lot of attention to. We'll say even the trades, we'll say gas plumbers, but and I've seen this happen, and it scares me to death. A lot of people want their fireplace converted from wood over to gas. So, and let's just say, and I appreciate him asking me that question because it made me think about that. And let's just say the customer has a gas key, and they have the little log lighter that goes underneath your wood logs, and every time they decide to build a wood fire, they can turn the gas key on. They light off the burner, which eventually lights the wood, and off, and now you have a rip roaring fire. Well, now there's not much pressure between that burner that's igniting and back all the way through that valve. But now, if you decide to take that burner off and you want to convert this thing over to gas logs, and especially like vent free, or even one of the newer vented sets that have controls at the logs, what you would do would be to turn this gas key on and leave it in the on position all the time, is mostly what most homeowners do. So that way they can hit the remote control, turn the logs on and off. But keep in mind that a lot of times when that pressure test is run on that system, it goes only to the gas key. It doesn't go all the way back up into the fireplace to where that burner is. So it's a good idea to, especially if you're going to install these, to check that pressure. Put a cap, take the burner off, cap it with an actual regulator or a PSI meter. Turn the gas on for a brief moment, turn it back off, and then see if your dial falls to zero. Because if it does, you got a leak in that all the way back down somewhere to your gas key. But if you don't do that, and you assume and you put your logs in, the logs may work great. But if you leave that gas key wide open, like most people do, you can slowly have a leak that builds up. And if you got a standing pilot, now you may have a little issue. So that's just something I've noticed over the years, and I've seen it happen.
Absolutely. Yeah, those are all really good points, Dennis. And man, I appreciate you so much. Man, we got a wealth of knowledge. Philip says he tells his customers to turn valve for a few seconds to purge the air out of the line, then light a match and place on embers or log ladder pipe, then go back and turn the valve on slowly to light the fire. Once it's lit, then you set the flame height where you want. Never turn the gas on when you're going to light it before you have a match struck. It's gas. And so here's an important thing to understand. Natural gas is lighter than air, so it's going to rise. Propane is heavier, it's going to fall. So depending on which system you have, you'll either have a fire that'll go boom out towards the floor if you leave that gas on before striking a match, or boom, and it'll go up towards the ceiling. So always operate with caution. Again, if you're a homeowner, talk to your CSIA certified sweep before doing any of this stuff, and let them help you, educate you. Come to our website, come to our YouTube channel. We have a tremendous amount of information out there. So, all right, Dennis, well, we'll wrap this thing up, man. What final words do you want to say to the folks out there across America that are watching, man?
Well, learn before you burn. If you have a gas appliance, no matter what it is, no matter how simple it is, and every one of us has seen these horror stories on YouTube, someone putting a turkey in a turkey fryer that didn't go well. If you have a fire in your home, period, doesn't matter if it's wood, kerosene, gas, whatever the fuel may be, get educated. Find someone who knows what, who's familiar with what you have, especially someone like an air industry is certified, and get as much information as what you have. And especially don't let everyone looks at the fireplace as being something they enjoy. It's relaxing, it's therapeutic. It's almost like a hot tub. It just feels good. It relaxes you. What you don't want is it to be something that upsets you. So that's, we want to enjoy it. It's a happy fire.
That's exactly right. And man, that was so good. I love that. Learn before you burn. That was good. And again, that's what that's what the CSIA is set up for, right? We say this every time, but we're going to educate our industry professionals, the men and women all over the place, and we're also going to educate our homeowners. And so that's what we're gearing this show towards. And so, Dennis, I cannot thank you enough for taking your time to come on here and share your knowledge with us, man, that you've spent, man, you have dedicated your life to our trade. You've raised up another generation, man. You've been a mentor to a lot of people, and man, you're just a great guy, Dennis, and a great guy to be around. And you've certainly taught me a lot, and I thank you for that, man. And thank you for coming on here tonight and sharing with us. It is much appreciated. And so for the folks out there, don't forget, we'll be back in 2 weeks from tonight. We'll have another guest, another topic. Look on Facebook, because we'll put this out with the topic that we're going to cover next time. And I can't thank you enough. And like and share this. We want to get this in front of as many people as we can. So like Dennis said, they learn before they burn. So we will leave you with that. And thanks again, Dennis. And we will see everybody in 2 weeks. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.